Hey guys, this is Yeager with Mettle. In this tutorial, we're going to take a detailed look at the Mantra VR panel that's a part of Mantra VR. Using the Mantra VR panel, we can add in nodes for controllers and for Mantra VR effects. We can then link these all together in various ways and add in expressions to create effects that would be very complicated and very difficult to replicate in the After Effects effects panel. In essence, it's a much faster way of creating complicated VR effects. We'll also take a look at some of the presets that are included with Mantra VR and some of the audio effects. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started in After Effects. Alright guys, inside of After Effects, I've got some 360 footage here added to a composition. And there's a couple ways we can launch the Mantra VR panel. You can do it from the effects list, or you can also do it from the window option here. If you click window, and you'll see extensions, and then you'll see Mettle Mantra VR panel. However, you're going to want to make sure you have the Mantra VR effect applied to some footage. So I'm just going to come over here to the effects and presets panel and just type in VR. And that'll toggle all the Mantra VR effects, and you'll see Mantra VR at the very top of the list. I'm just going to select that and drag it onto my 360 footage. If we come over here to the effects and presets panel, you're going to see a few options such as toggle panel, a master controller, and some audio controllers here if we toggle this down. I'm going to go through all of those in this tutorial. First thing I want to do though is just go ahead and launch the Mantra VR panel, and I'm just going to click toggle panel. And after we do that, you're going to see this pop up here, which is the Mantra VR panel. You can move this around, and you can also dock it if you want to in After Effects. For the time being, I'm just going to leave it floating for this tutorial so I can move it in and out of the shot as needed. Now inside of the panel, you're going to see you have a master controller, and then if you have some controllers here you can add, and you have some effects. And over here on this side, you can see we have these presets we can go ahead and click. I'll go ahead and add one of these to the shot just so we can take a look at what this does. So I added the aescripts effect preset, and you can see we have some twists going on the footage, and you can see it is animated with expressions. Essentially an infinite loop there. And we can come over here and look at what's happening in the panel. You can see we have a loop linked to the aescripts node on the zoom loop. And we're also using a repeater node and a Mobius transformation node. And if you come over here and look at the actual effects panel, you can see all the effects that are currently applied in After Effects, and you can see the red indicates that there is an expression linked to that. So you can see the zoom loop is linked to the loop. But in other cases, there'll be a lot of other features that are highlighted in red, so those all have expressions linked to them. Now, if we want to go ahead and get rid of this preset we have in the panel, we can go ahead and just click on the trash can here, and that'll close it. And you can see that went ahead and deleted everything from our panel and from the effects panel in After Effects on our footage. And we also have an undo option here. And also, if you want to go ahead and close the panel, you just click the X, it'll close, and if you want to relaunch it, you can launch it back. And it will retain everything you've added in here. It won't delete anything when you close it. So let's go ahead and add another preset here just to see what we can come up with. So I'm going to add in the ice cage. And you can see this is a very complicated effect. We have a ton of nodes here with circular waves, master controllers, point of interest. And we can come over here and preview this on our footage. And so you can see what that looks like. We have all these blocks essentially on our 360 footage. And you can see all these highlighted in red here, which means there's a ton of stuff linked with expressions. And you can see all these various links we have going on in here. Let me go ahead and demonstrate the master controller though. So I can go ahead and toggle the master controller. I can pull this down, and you can see how it's going to actually affect our video. And you can see it's basically pulling the entire effect down, all of these effects. If I pull it all the way to 0, it will completely remove it. So I'm going to set that back at 100, and I'm going to close the Mantra VR panel. And you can also animate and keyframe the master controller here from the effects panel. So it's really convenient when you want to dial in and out of very stylized looks. All right, I'm going to go ahead and launch the panel again, and I'm going to go ahead and delete that preset. Now let's go ahead and start adding in our own node controllers and node effects, and to create some very basic effects using the Mantra VR panel just to get familiar with everything. So the first effect I want to add here is actually going to be a circular waves effect, and you're going to see that adds that circular waves node. And I'm also going to add in a meridian waves node. Now what's interesting to note is you can move these around. You can just click and drag them anywhere in the panel. And what I like to show here is that the circular waves effect is on top of meridian waves. If we come over here to the After Effects effects panel, you'll see the circular waves effect is above meridian waves here. But if I actually move these around, you can see they're automatically going to update the order over here in the After Effects effects panel. So it is responsive in that respect. It also works the same way with the controllers. So I'm going to come over to the controller node and add in angle controller. And you can see if I move this angle controller to the bottom, you'll see that'll be all the way to the bottom of the effects and presets panel over here. And I like to keep my controllers actually below most of my effects just so those are at the bottom, especially if they're linked. That way it's easy to find them and animate them if I need to. So let's go ahead and link up this angle controller to our effect node. So I'm just going to click right here on the gray circle, and pull out the link there. And I'm gonna come over here to circular waves, and anything highlighted in white is what we can link it to. So I'm gonna link this to the phase and just let go, and you'll see those two are linked together now. And I'm just gonna do the same thing again here for meridian waves, clicking and dragging, and I'm gonna link this also with the phase of meridian waves. So now you can see both of these effects are linked to this one angle controller, and I'm just gonna resize this a little bit here and move it out of the way so we can actually see what's happening. So if I go ahead and animate this angle controller, you can see it's gonna animate the phase of both of those effects at the same time. I'll go ahead and move this back in the center of frame. Now there's a couple other options we can do right now. The first one would be if you want to rename any of these. So let's say I wanted to go ahead and rename this angle controller as phase. And in order to do that, all you need to do is hover your mouse over the name and just double click. And you can see you'll have the option to rename. So I'm just going to change this to phase. And it's very important here, after you type in the name, just make sure you hit the enter key. If you accidentally click away, it actually won't rename and it'll go back to the original name. So again, we can rename the controllers, and we can also rename the effects here. So if I wanted to rename one of those, I would just double click on the name and just name this whatever I wanted to. I'll just call this Waves 1 and hit enter. And on this one, I'll double click and I'm just going to name this Waves 2 and hit enter. And conversely, if we come over here to the effects and presets panel, you'll see that those have been renamed here as well. You'll see Waves 1, Waves 2, and the phase controller here. Now, for whatever reason, if you've linked something up and you want to go ahead and disconnect it, that's very easy as well. I'm just going to highlight my mouse over Waves 2, over the phase effect, and I'm just going to right click, and you're going to see that's going to break that link. And it's also been updated over here in our composition. But for this, I'm going to go ahead and link that back up. It's just going to go ahead and show you how you can disconnect those. Now let's take a look at adding in an expression in the Mantra VR panel. You'll see this little F icon right here. That's the expression icon. Go ahead and click that. And it's going to pop up the edit expression box. And this is really easy to use, just like you would in After Effects. You can click in here and type in any expression in After Effects you like. I'm going to go ahead and type in time and then times 400, which essentially is just going to be a loop for that phase effect. But it's very important, after you type in your expression, make sure you click on Enable Expression right there and go ahead and click Save. And now if I can move this out of the way and we go ahead and RAM preview this, we'll see what's happening. So we can see the phase is being animated by that expression we added in. And we can also see over here that it is red, indicating that there is an expression on the phase. So I'm going to move back in the panel. Now for whatever reason, if you want to undo that expression, just click on that expression icon and you can disable it right there, but leaving in the actual expression. So if you want to go ahead and click Save and then preview other results, and then you can always go back and enable it back on. When it is enabled, you'll see it does turn blue down there for the expression icon. Again, we can also animate the master controller here to dial back both the effects. Any effects that are in here will be dialed back with the master controller, so you don't actually have to link those. They're automatically linked. So let's go ahead and add in another controller here to get familiar with some of the controllers. So I'm going to add in a point control now. I really like the way the point control works here. So I'm going to go ahead and link this point controller to each of these effects. So I'm just click and drag. And now those are linked. And let's say I want to add an expression onto this point controller. So I'll just click on the expression icon. And I'm going to click in here and I'm going to add a wiggle effect to the point of interest. So wiggle, open parentheses, and 3 times a second, comma, I'm going to have it move 300 pixels, and then close parentheses. This will be a very sporadic expression here. I'm going to go ahead and enable the expression and click Save. And I'll just move this out of the way. Let's go ahead and preview the result of this. And now you can see we're getting some very sporadic movements, all linked again to that point controller expression, while the phase is actually animating as well. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move the panel back in the screen here. Finally, if we want to add in another one of the controllers, we have a slider controller we'll add in here. I'll move it actually to the top of these other controllers. And I'll move my waves effect up. That way the slider controller is still lower than them over here in the effects and presets panel. And I'm going to link the slider controller up to the wave length of each of these effects. And you can see currently the slider controller is at 0, so they are reflected at 0 here in the actual effect. And as I increase that, you can see how this changes the results we get. When I increase it really high, we get really large waves there. So I could also add an expression onto the slider controller. So I'm going to set it on 8 and click on the expressions here, and I'll do a wiggle expression on that as well. And once per second, I'm going to have the value change by 3. Because we're at 8, We don't want to have it too big of a number here because it would get a little too sporadic, I think. I'm going to do close parentheses, and I'm going to go ahead and enable the expression and click save. And we can go ahead and see what this looks like as well. So there you go. We're getting very subtle differences there in the wavelength while everything else is animating. And you can see the various values that are on everything just by moving the current time indicator in the timeline. You can see how everything's updating to see how the expressions are changing. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move the panel back into the screen. I'm actually going to close the panel here, and we're going to come over here to the After Effects panel, and we're going to look at the master controller, and just to demonstrate how you could kind of keyframe that. So let's say this effect started out like this, and we wanted this to phase into the normal footage. And so I'm just going to go ahead and around the 3-second mark here, I'm going to create a master keyframe and just kind of have that fade out over 2 seconds or so. And I'm going to set this at 0. And if I select my footage here, I'm going to hit U on the keyboard to see those keyframes. I might select both of those and hit F9 just to ease those really quickly for this preview. I'm going to go ahead and RAM preview this just so we can see how the master controller affects the overall effect. So here we go. You can see we get the Mantra VR abstract effects on our footage, and then it fades into the normal footage. So that's a really convenient way if you want to just go ahead and dial down any effects you have, is just using that master controller. All right, I'm going to go ahead and launch the panel again. And I'm actually going to go ahead and delete that effect. And under controllers, you're also going to see some audio controllers. We'll go ahead and add this here. These pertain to any audio that you have linked with the Mantra VR effect, and they work in a very similar way as these other controllers. We're going to look at the audio a little bit more here in the actual After Effects panel, but I just wanted to show you what those were. Go ahead and delete that, and I'm actually going to close the panel for the time being, and we're going to look at some of the audio reactivity. So if I toggle this down, you're going to see the first option here is to select an audio layer. And if I go ahead and check that, you can see we have access to all the various layers in our composition. Now my actual video layer doesn't have any music, but I have a music track here also in my composition. So if I select that layer with the Mantra VR effect on it, and under audio layer, I'm going to select my music, which is uplifting house.wave. Next, after we select that, we need to select what effect it has on the master controller. And so if I toggle this down, you can see we have bass, low mid-range, mid-range, and upper mid-range. Typically, I like to set it on low mid-range. And you can see we have the other audio options over here. And so we have the low mid-range area here. And you can go ahead and adjust where the low area is from the hertz. Here you can have from hertz and then to. And so you can adjust these to different values if you need to broaden the range. We also have some other effects we can adjust, such as the low denoiser, the low amplifier, and the low output. And what I really like to do is when I have some music on something that's being affected by the Mantra VR effects, I like to also use the master controller keyframe to kind of animate that in and out as well. And I'll show you my technique for doing that. I'm actually going to uncheck the keyframe here for the master, and I'm going to toggle this back up to 100. However, I'm also going to show you a preset that's in the Mantra VR panel. But before you actually use any of the presets in the Mantra VR panel that deal with audio, you'll see audio reactive right here. I'm going to go ahead and select that. And now we have an audio reactive effect applied to our footage, which is these chrome spheres with a bass output and a low output. However, you won't see any changes to your composition if you don't have an audio layer selected over here in the Mantra VR panel. So if you apply any audio reactive effects, you're going to want to make sure you have some music already selected in the Mantra VR panel. So I'm going to go ahead and close this up, and let's go ahead and do a quick RAM preview of this to see what we've got going on here. So you can see we're getting some very abstract results from the chrome spheres effect. Now it's going a little extreme. You can see everything's getting kind of blown out, a little too large here. But a quick and easy way to kind of dial that back, again, is with the master controller. So you can see if I'm at a point where the spheres are kind of really blown out on the screen, I'm going to dial those back down using the master controller. You can see as I pull that down, they're resizing smaller. And so I could kind of set the maximum threshold using the master controller here when I'm at a peak point in the music. And so you can see at this point I've got it set at 41. So now let's go ahead and do another RAM preview to see the results of this. And so you can see that's a lot more manageable to kind of make out what's happening. And again, we could even lower this even more if we wanted to. So definitely toggling the master controller and adjusting it with your music and the size of your effects is definitely going to be key. However, I'm going to go ahead and toggle the VR panel again. I'm actually going to delete that preset, and we're going to set up some kind of adjustments over here with our music just in the After Effects panel. So I'm going to go ahead and close this up. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to select the circular waves effect. So another way of doing it is just applying effects directly underneath Mantra VR right here in the Effects and Presets panel. So if I apply the circular waves effect, you're going to see just by applying it here, we can already adjust the overall effect using the master controller. And because we already have an audio layer selected, that audio layer is going to play off the music and affect the overall master of this circular waves effect. So let's go ahead and do a RAM preview of this to see the results. So now we can see how the music's actually affecting the circular waves, essentially the wave length and the amplitude. Again, if we wanted to dial up or down the effect, you could easily do that using the master controller. And you could also do it using the actual effect itself. If you want to go ahead and increase the amplitude, and let's say this was a little too much for us, you could always come up here to the master controller and dial that back down. Now what do I do in this case with this music? In order to have it kind of fade in and fade out with the overall effect, I might start out with having the master controller set right here at like 45. So I might do a keyframe, might move down here a little ways. And so we can kind of see this effect is affecting our footage. And around 3 seconds or just whenever you want to, I might do another keyframe on the master controller. And then I would have that gradually fade out. So this gives us a little more control over where the effect is happening on our footage just by keyframing again the master controller. So let's go ahead and RAM preview this now. And you can see how we have the music effect happening at the beginning of our footage and then it fades out gradually. And again, we could easy ease these keyframes or whatever we wanted to do. It's just that a lot of times when you have the Mantra VR effects affecting your footage based off the music, you're probably not going to want to have that on there the entire time. And so again, a way of dialing that back off is using the master controller. Feel free to experiment with all the various settings you have here under the audio reactivity and also on your Mantra VR layers. And you can also link specific audio areas to various Mantra VR effects settings. And you would do that through the Mantra VR panel. Again, I'm going to go ahead and toggle the panel. So in the panel, we come over here to the controllers. You can see we have these other audio effects. So I could select an audio bass output and I could link this to other options specifically under the circular waves effect, such as the wave length. And so when the bass hits there, the wavelength will increase. I might need to dial down the actual bass output level here to something a little more reasonable. And we can go ahead and RAM preview this. And you can see when the bass was actually hitting there that the wavelength is actually getting a little bit bigger because it's linked to that bass output we have here in the Mantra VR panel. So definitely feel free to experiment and get lots of various results, linking various music outputs to other effect settings in each of the Mantra VR effects. Alright guys, hopefully you picked up some tips and tricks from this overview of the Mantra VR panel. It's been Charles Yeager from Mettle. Thanks for watching.